The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Ben Ark from LN Bits,
Hello, good evening.
Josh Shigala from the Standard.io,
Evening, Gov.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1. Bitcoin recovers ahead of Trump's Blockworks speech. Is a major bull run about to begin? Just last week, everyone had given up on Bitcoin. Henny penny, the sky is falling. They thought the price was just going to go down forever. Now, the president's making a speech. The stock market seems to have stabilized, and people are saying there just might be a second leg to the bull run like all the charts said in the first place. Ben Ark, the price of Bitcoin is saved, and we have political speeches to thank.
I think it's denial. And if we have a look at the chart, this is a new section I want to call Bitcoin charts and trading with Ben. We've got
It definitely needs a jingle.
yeah, tick. We've got a descending wedge. We've got a dead cat bounce. We've got no support, and we're fucked. Sorry to swear so early on in the show. So this is all the Trump, hysteria, and then we bounce along, and then it's all going downhill from there. And I just can't see any recovery, significant recovery, which is going to happen because there's just not enough momentum. Dead cat bounces all the way, baby. And then our next resistance zone is at what, like 60 grand or something. So that's probably where we're heading. Just off the back of this, you got the leader of the free world, the US president is doing a televised video call talk promoting Bitcoin and talking about how they're going to make this Bitcoin reserve and make the US the center of Bitcoin adoption, blah, blah, blah. And look how much the market cares. It just doesn't really care. So not very bullish on the news. And similarly, when it comes to the stock, as the general sort of stock exchange, there's too much instability. Maybe if something happens which creates stability, like the Trump actually manages to have an impact on the Ukraine crisis, I think that would have a good impact on the markets, because people would be like, okay, this guy's not a lunatic. Maybe there's some method to his madness, which I personally don't believe, but the markets might reflect that. And then there'll be some stability. But with all the tariffs, and it's like you've got a fair weather cycle in the economy where we could be, having a good time and having a bit of a bull run, and then he's decided to fill it full of storms, which is quite scary, because then when you have these black swan events like COVID or a war or whatever else, and that usually you use the surplus from your fair weather economy to then buffer out the dip in the market. But I don't think that's going to happen, because we've created this sort of unnecessary choppy weather in the markets. So pretty bearish on everything. Not much more to say, really.
Well, if your standard is the president not acting like a lunatic, you're going to be in tough supply this time. I still think there's a possibility of a supply squeeze and a altcoin season and everything that everyone wants. Josh Shigala, what do you think? The president's promoting Bitcoin. This is all we've ever wanted and all we've ever needed, right?
Well, I think that the economy it's been set up for a non-fair weather event. The crisis in Europe, the crisis in the Middle East, they were all there before this champion got into power, and it will get sorted. It will get sorted. We will have peace, and the market needs to correct. In fact, the markets have been so overblown over the last few years. And not only that, I mean, the entire system, the fractional reserve system, has been built upon debt on debt on debt on debt on debt. It's very, very hard to pay down. So everything that the US is doing and inspiring the rest of the world to do is really, really important. We need to remove this vast amount of debt, because it gets so crazy out of control that especially America, because America underpins the rest of the world with their money supply. So when they print, everybody prints. When they start to save on, well, if they have less inflation, the rest of the world starts to do the same. And so I think what will happen is the market needs a correction anyway, because it was pumped on fluff. The entire market was a massive Terra Luna fluff machine, and it needs to have a correction. So that's what's happening. And yeah, I'm just it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to work, load up on some liquidity, so you can actually buy some of the assets that you'd like. This goes for traditional assets like houses, property, real estate, all that sort of stuff, as well as cryptos. You can't keep going up and up and up, and markets need to correct, especially if they're built on fluff and nonsense, like they were through the COVID nonsense, printing money out of nowhere, bailing everybody out, specifically the banks, and saying that it's a check for everybody, a stimulus check. All these checks that they sent everybody, they got sent to the banks first. The banks paid off debts first before they gave it to people. The whole thing was a scam. So, and it was a scam that basically got paid for by savers through inflation. And now, well, we're going to have a correction. That's just part of it. It's never been hidden. Politicians like to hide the fact that there will be, if they're proper. If they're a shit politician, just like a shit CEO, they will try to make a company go up and up and up in stock. They'll only think short term by making it go up and up and up. And they won't, a bad CEO will basically just do short term thinking to make the speculators happy on the stock exchange. Whereas a good CEO will think long term, will do proper spending, will pay down debt, will buy all the machinery necessary to have a fair weather lifestyle within their company, and then that will work out. Yeah, the shareholders might not be happy in that first 6 months when the CEO is buying all that really important stuff for the company, but long term they'll be happy because he or she is building a fantastic company that will stretch out over time.
Well, that's why I'm glad we have a good CEO that's been in charge of such a large company with so many stockholders, so many board of directors meetings. Oh, wait, we have a CEO from a family company that's never had a shareholder or a board of directors meeting. I do agree, Josh, it is exciting times, like the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. And I also do agree that the market doesn't just go straight up. It does have these corrections. It has these ups and downs. Everyone's like, Facebook stock's the greatest thing ever, but it goes up and down, especially in these early periods like we're in for Bitcoin. And as the man said in the Nirvana song, you should load up on guns, bring your friends. It's fun to lose and to pretend.
I just feel like you could be a little bit more cautious ripping off that band-aid. Just don't rip it quite so hard, because I understand the markets need a correction, but what you don't want is, arguably the Great Depression was a correction, but it sucked, and the only way that the economies managed to get out of the Great Depression was by massive government spending and taxing the rich and things like the New Deal. So desperate measures desperate times required desperate measures to get us out of that mess. And with taking like a globalized world and like shaking it up the way Trump is, it could cause something like a Great Depression event, and that's what we don't want. And we want a gentle correction. So I just wanted to be a little bit more tentative in his reforms. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, blah, blah. I'm sick of the politicians. Oh, well, we'll have a meeting and an inquiry about this and that, and they just never get shit done. All they do is have meetings because it's got to be gentle. Nah, get in there. He's got 4 years. Get in there. Clean it up. Clean up the nonsense. Australia, for instance, has 17% public sector workers. 17% of all workers are paid by the taxpayer. Ridiculous. a ridiculous amount. Like it needs, private sector is voluntary. It's not paid for by coercion and force. It's paid for by voluntarily, people voluntarily paying for that service. And this is what the North Star for me personally is: how do we remove more violence and coercion, and how do you have more peaceful markets? And that is the free markets.
Well, and I think that's the example right there. Josh wants a government that's more like a business, more responsive to people's needs. And Ben wants it to slow down and think about the consequences. And I think we're going to find out what the difference between those two attempts and approaches is. And I think that we're going to see that the main difference here is when early investors lose all their money in Facebook, they're early investors. Usually they're even accredited investors, i.e. already rich. So it's not a big deal if they lose their money. But if someone who's on food stamps is now entered into a market and things go up and down, they lose all of their food stamps money, they starve to death. In the same way, if you move fast and break things and you're at a startup and you mess up and you turn off the server over the weekend, we lose some traffic, we lose some business. It's not great for the company, right? But if I turn off Ebola protection over the weekend, if I turn off food aid over the weekend, I can kill people, millions of people. And I think that's what we're going to see, is that when you run the government like a business, the outages, the little things on the side, the externalities, they call them in business, the collateral damage, we call them in the military. Collateral damage is going to be people's lives. And we're just going to...
You don't think that governments have collateral damage by all the crap they've, and the massive overhead in the bureaucracy has collateral damage, then you're totally blindfolded to the fact that
we're going to be able to know, because we know what the current system's doing. And when you take everything away, we're going to do a new set of studies, and we're going to find out what happens without the current system, and we're going to compare
more
the two
studies.
numbers,
Fantastic.
and you're going to lose. Well, again,
why you need studies? You just need the market. The market will tell you. Will give you price
we have
feedback.
to observe everything. We're going back to an observer culture. We're like cavemen. I don't believe it. I didn't see it. Let's go back to studies.
No, that's not true. The free market is, the government's a caveman.
That's not true. I didn't see it.
The future.
I got a cousin. My cousin said that this happened.
The enlightenment is markets, is free, is me going to Ben, I voluntarily want to give you value that I've collected for the service that you've created. Not the give me your money, don't worry, we're going to do good things with it. But you're holding a gun to my head for the money. No, what? No, we're going to do a good thing. We're going to educate children. Pay up. Like, it's just nonsense. It's a nonsense system. Free and voluntary is the only system we should be heading towards.
I'm partly in agreement with Josh on free exchange of goods and services, but I do think there's the massive difference in types of private capital. So big corporations, for example, that's a very different sort of capital to, SMEs, which are providing a local service and pump it into their local economy. And I kind of fear that some of the tariffs and some of the measures which Trump takes is going to impact some of those smaller businesses, which might just not have the reserves to tide over for stormy weather when it comes to the economy, which is what kind of happened in that Great Depression event. But as Thomas is saying, it's going to be, let's see what happens. It's a brave new world. I hope Josh is right, and I hope that we're wrong, because it'll be a better world for it. But I fear that maybe it's a little bit too much unpredictability for people's lives and the economy, and it might have a negative effect. But we did say at the beginning of the show, we were like, no politics, no religion in this show, and look at us.
No politics, no religion.
Well, let's also not lose track of what's great about a startup or what's great about a business. Most anything that's wrong with a business can be fixed with money. If you get a new round on your startup, it fixes all the problems from your previous round. However, if we look at the way that government works, if you cut off education funding, people don't go to school, they don't go to college, we don't get useful, educated people out of those people. We lose that input. In the same way, if we don't give food aid to people and they starve to death and die, we lose that input. We can't just put in another $5 million, get that person's life back. So I think we're going to see, by the studies, the horrible results of this plan.
How do we circle this
Yeah.
back around to Bitcoin? How does Bitcoin fix all this? Remember, we're on a Bitcoin show.
Well, first we go to the picture and we say, "Wow, what a horrible old picture. Who's that guy standing behind the president? He's not there anymore. I wonder why." I think they tried to
Because
hang.
he's a dick. That's
Oh
why.
yeah, they tried to hang him. But let's move on to the round of exit question. Trump vows to make the U.S. the undisputed Bitcoin superpower and crypto capital of the world. The former wrestler said that he wanted to pass landmark legislation creating simple common sense rules for stable coins and market structure. Ben Ark, they say Bitcoin. The guys bribe them with Bitcoin. They get them to go to the Bitcoin convention. They wave the Bitcoin flag. And then all of a sudden, all the meetings are about stable coins. What do you think? Are they going to respect Bitcoin, or is this another end around where the powers that be, the new boss is just like the old boss, and they go after Bitcoin again?
So I forgot that he was a wrestler. But he was a wrestler.
That's very true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind
Who
of
was a wrestler? What?
Trump. He was a wrestler. He entered the ring a couple of times. He had that fight with Vince McMahon. It was pretty cool.
He smacked someone with a chair. He was thrown into a table. Yes.
Yeah, for
Well,
like an
First
unhealthy
president of the
guy.
United States was a
It was a
fake
marketing.
wrestler. Yes, fake
For an
wrestler.
unhealthy guy who doesn't exercise is quite impressive that he didn't hurt himself too much.
Secretary
So-
of Education, also wife of the wrestler, and involved in the actions on stage as well. Many videos.
I think he's starting to drink the Kool-Aid on the Bitcoin stuff. I honestly think that the US appreciate that if they want to keep the US dollar as world reserve currency, probably their best play is just to somehow adopt Tether, because it's already penetrated the market, it's already used widely, rather than try and produce their own stable coin thing. And it's, as Josh will tell you, it's like it's really hard to get these things right. And if a whole economy is dependent or reliant upon that technology, then you have to be very, very careful. Whereas Tether's proved itself to work, and it hasn't broken yet. So I honestly think that they're looking at that as a possible solution for a US dollar, like a digitally native US dollar. And then when it comes to Bitcoin, I also think that they probably know that when you have fiat and Bitcoin existing in the same world, like fiat's kind of on a downward spiral, in that Bitcoin has a whole bunch of properties which fiat just can't compete with, and it will be out competed with over time. And I was thinking earlier today, like there will be a point where a country does a MicroStrategy. It just sells government bonds and buys Bitcoin, sells government bonds and buys Bitcoin. The argument being in 10 years' time that Bitcoin's going to be worth an absolute fortune, which gives the government bonds some value. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. And he's having a lot of advice from people like the MicroStrategy guy, Saylor. I forgot his name for a second then. But I think and he's also got the other guy, the guy with the funny guy. He's got him as well, and seems to be an actual Bitcoiner. For all his faults, he is an actual Bitcoiner. So I think he has a lot of people probably saying the right things to him and accumulating Bitcoin, creating a US stable coin for the world to use. I mean, the reality is, like in these countries where we try and push Bitcoin adoption on the Lightning Network, like often the real problem is the stable medium of exchange issue if you're on a subsistence wage. And a lot of them use Tether. A lot of them use stable coins because they need them in those countries for payments. And historically, they were the countries where the use case is already there, the technology already exists. I mean, it's I think probably a wise decision to pay a lot of attention to stable coins, and then also heed some of the advice of the people around you who are talking about Bitcoin. Not that I want Bitcoin adoption from the top down. I want it from the bottom up, of course. So ultimately, I don't endorse it or care about it, but it's probably a good strategy.
Well, I'm going to make the same argument that I've been making, and I'm going to keep making it. They control the US dollar. They control the world's reserve currency. It's an incredibly powerful position to be in. Like Ben said, if you don't like the dollar, if you think it's no good, make a digital dollar, not just the ones that the banks use and send around, but an actual digital dollar for the people, a consumer product. If you don't like inflation, tell the Fed to stop printing money. Don't spend the money in tax cuts. which is what's going to happen. Spoiler alert. But once again, they control the U.S. reserve, the world's reserve currency, which is a position of power in the world. If the United States loses being the world reserve currency, whether it's to Bitcoin, to the yuan, to something else, it's less good for the United States, less good for the country that they run, less good for the country that they allegedly live in. So I don't understand this. Like, if you're any other country, you're like France, you're not the world's reserve currency. Destroy your own currency, replace it with the Bitcoin, compete against the dollar. If you own, run, control the dollar, hold all of your assets in dollar, your real estate's valued in dollars, why destroy the dollar? Like, and unless you're working against the country, you hate the country, that's cool. Destroy the dollar. You think it would be funny. You think chaos is funny. You think revolution is clean and pretty, and the results are going to be fine for you. Destroy the dollar.
Is it not just getting ahead of the revolution? Like, they see the writing on the wall, and then they're like, well, okay, we can try and fight this thing, which is impossible, and it's a battle we're not going to win, or we can try and get ahead of it and then produce like a stable US dollar, which everyone's going to use. And while doing that, also start accumulating some Bitcoin, because probably that at some point will outcompete the US dollar. Because you've got these things like MicroStrategy.
Safe landing is a possible theory, right? We're coming in for a safe landing, but again, they control the actual resource. So for every other country, safe landing, hedging your bets, all of these things are fine. But if you're the country that owns the thing, what you're doing is you're increasing the problem. You're starting a domino effect. Whether you believe the dollar's doomed or not, you're looking at this again like the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. Do we have 1,000 years of darkness or 100,000 years of darkness?
But then the US dollar itself, like, its value is your faith in the US economy to be able to honor that things you can pay the bearer with, isn't it, as a fiat currency? So if there is this process of accumulating Bitcoin and they have these holdings, so ultimately, like, if it does shift to the world shifts to a more Bitcoin economy where everyone's transferring value in Bitcoin, then by them having a Bitcoin reserve, it is going to put them in a better position, because they still have that good faith. They still have as
long as the Bitcoin reserve is secret, it puts them in a good position. What we have here is the opposite of the doomsday machine from Dr. Strangelove. In Dr. Strangelove, the Russians have created a doomsday machine. If you fire a weapon at us, we will destroy the world. Doomsday. Therefore, no one would fire the weapon. The problem is they turn the machine on Friday with a plan to tell people about it on Monday. So there's this gap. Same thing here. You have to keep it secret. If you're accumulating Bitcoin publicly, if you're making speeches about it, you're, whether you like it or not, destroying the value of the US dollar, the currency, the thing that you own, right? You are making it weaker, whether there's a run or not, and you're accelerating the run.
Oh, God, you've got such a extreme case of TDS. It's like anything that guy does, you're just against, dude. Like it's amazing.
Talk about the specific issue. Don't just contemplate. Contemplate what you like. Talk about the specific issue.
Okay, the specific issue is that,
and you're weakening the thing you own. Why is that logical?
Because he's not buying it. He said all they are doing is keeping the Bitcoin that they confiscate. I don't even like that. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I don't really care about governments
that they want to expand the program. So essentially, they're advertising worse. You're creating the theory of the doomsday machine without actually making the machine. Like, you have to actually make the reserve.
They're not. They're saying, look, there's value here because it's a rare. They're saying there's value here. Why are we selling it to the free market?
That argument, Josh. There's value in old Rolex watches. There's value in real estate. There's value in art. Many things are confiscated from criminals, and they have value, and we don't keep them in a reserve.
Look, I'm just saying that it makes sense to stockpile Bitcoin for anybody, whether you're a mafia, or a government. Whether you're a mafia or a government or a private citizen, it makes sense to stockpile the rarest thing on the planet. The only thing that's rarer is you as an individual, and so buying. You don't need to buy this stuff, but also taking advantage. And I've said this on the show many times: taking advantage of the fact that America has, by default, the crypto advantage, because everybody uses US based stable coins. They should take advantage of that. The EU is busy being idiots, absolute fools, by destroying it through regulation. That nobody's ever going to make a euro stablecoin that makes any sense. And so they will never pick up that network effect. The US is lucky enough to already have the network effect by default. The system was born with it because Tether. And they are going to take advantage of that by supporting US-based stablecoins, and keep the fact that everybody, whether I pay a Chilean worker or somebody in El Salvador or somebody in Africa, they will be denominating it in US dollars. And that's all they care about. And that's fair enough. If I was the mafia running my own US, my own currency, I'd also want the world to denominate it in my currency. And that's what's happened. And they should support it if they want to keep their dollar.
Yeah, I agree.
Eventually everything will be crypto.
Work, absolutely. Like, work with the advantage they have. Like,
Yes.
why would they fight it? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like,
It doesn't make sense. It only makes sense if the banks are lobbying them to crush it, which was what was happening under a democratic rule, under the Democrats. It was basically destroy everything through the SEC, through this nonsense bureaucracy. Now it's like it's way more supportive, and I think it's going to be we're still going to see a massive bull market because of it.
Yeah, and I honestly think it's the MicroStrategy. So the existence of Bitcoin is the death rattle for fiat currencies. We all know that, and because it can't exist in the same market as Bitcoin, because you have a MicroStrategy, you have these bugs in the system where you can just get credit, buy Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin being deflationary is going to go up in value, and there's nothing the fiat can do about it. And then as soon as a government starts doing that, then it's game over. Like, fiat's dead. Like, it's just dying. It's just on its deathward spiral. And why wouldn't the US government want, like you say, Josh, because they have the everyone's using Tether, everyone's using USD stable coins. The worst thing they could possibly do would be to try and fight the progression of Bitcoin. The best thing they could do is drive it and accumulate as much Bitcoin as they can.
Yeah, and small countries will try to follow the US, print their own currency to buy Bitcoin and destroy themselves. And it's not just that, it's that people will take out private credit to buy Bitcoin. And it is a bug in the system. It's a bug in the fiat system. You can print to infinity to buy something rare, only to the point where people stop taking your infinite money for their Bitcoin. And at that point, you get a god candle.
That's when one Bitcoin's worth $600 billion right there.
$600 billion. Oh, we're going to see. I wonder if we're going to see headlines.
If you own the world's reserve currency, you would want to have that happen as slow as possible. You would want to delay that process. So anything that accelerates that process, you would want to not do.
You would want to be in front of it and make sure you're the one driving that process if it's going to happen anyway.
If it's going to happen anyway. And I don't know that they believe it's inevitable. Again, they all believe it's digital gold right now.
It's very conflicting with Trump because there's 10% of the stuff he does, and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. That's the right thing to do. And the other stuff, obviously, I can't agree with because of where I sit politically. But yeah, and this is one of those things where I'm just thinking that's the logical thing to do. And for doing it, maybe he's not a lunatic. I hate the guy, but maybe he's not a lunatic.
I'm there. 90% is right. We've got a strange Venn diagram there, Ben.
Well, and again, it's not that he ideologically believes in this. He was not a Bitcoiner. He said that it was a scam many years ago. After they paid
that's because he's been educated.
Money, with votes and money, or he's been bribed. He's been educated overnight with votes and money and no education.
The guy famously doesn't even use email. Like, he's not a digital person.
Doesn't read books. I mean,
Thomas, but Bitcoin is for everyone, even for knobhead presidents. Come on.
That's the other thing. I still don't think that we need government support. I don't think that this necessarily gets us where we're going faster. I think this makes the whole like double cross thing even worse, when all of a sudden the government declares Bitcoin illegal and everyone says, oh, but the president says it was going to be good and we were going to turn off Operation Chokehold 2.0 and all this stuff. But at a certain point, like Josh and Ben have said, if Bitcoin is better money, if it's better currency, if it is in every way better, the way that the internet was better, the MP3 was better, then it's going to cause problems with the existing currency and they're going to have to turn it off.
I mean, I totally as well. Like Thomas, you are. I mean, me and Josh here, we're speaking from other parts of the world, and I get that you're in it. You know, that's your country, and it must be. I honestly, for people in the US who like Bitcoin, but then also like their country, I honestly get the not hysteria, but the panic. You know, and also having to like, just to having to come to terms with the fact that Bitcoin might not be in your country's best interest, the existence of Bitcoin. But honestly, this is probably the best policy. Just get ahead of the revolution and you work the advantage you have, which is they have all the stable coins out there.
Well, Bitcoin's definitely not in the best interest of most countries. As we've talked about before, it ruins the ability of countries to sanction other countries. You can get around the sanctions using Bitcoin or other countries. Things we've seen, currencies, as we've seen recently in North Korea, hackers, incredibly talented people can bring funds back to your country through cryptocurrencies, upsetting the international order, making money in ways that country is not capable of otherwise. It's very interesting.
They could arguably be tools which we shouldn't have. Like the ability to sanction other countries is arguably a tool. Like Keynes would argue that. That's why he wanted to ban core a political medium of exchange for current countries. Because as soon as you have like a reserve currency which can enact sanctions, then it escalates into war. So as a force for good and for peace, like having an apolitical medium of exchange which you can't sanction and everyone can just use, and it might not necessarily be such a bad thing.
Well, we also have the ability to print money for disaster relief, to print money and use it for war, to do all of these things, which essentially, if you take the Bitcoin experiment on a long enough timeline, it eliminates the ability of governments to do this. They're going to actually for real and not just create it.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there is still within the tool set the ability to create value through token or whatever else, to create some value for, you know, as a sort of bond, as to here's something you can buy now on the open market and this thing will be worth more money if we manage to fix this crisis, which we have. So I wouldn't worry too much.
Well, we'll see. We live in interesting times.
We'll see.
The exit question for the exit question against the Bitcoin predictor ball, which of course was correct last week, as it is always correct. Ben Ark, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Dead cat bounces, man. We're going down. There's no resistance. And off the president talking about Bitcoin in such a favorable way should have sent the price skyrocketing through the skies, and it really didn't. There's nothing there. We're going down.
Josh Shigala, higher or lower?
I think we're going sideways for a while and build a good solid floor. This is what will be there building, but yeah, who knows? Who knows? All we know is that we don't know shit about fuck.
Sideways, push, that's the worst answer. Here we go. What's the price going to be? Will it be higher this time next week? And it is... Don't count on it. Don't count on it. The ball is pessimistic like Ben.
Sideways, see? Sideways.
Yeah, because you did say, to be fair, Thomas, you did say, is it going to be higher or lower? And then the ball said, don't count on it, which means sideways. So Josh is right.
No, I asked the ball higher. I always ask the ball higher because that improves our odds.
You said higher or lower?
I asked you guys higher or lower because you can make a binary choice. The ball is a yes or no question.
I hope, if only this thing was recorded, eh?
I know. Play it back. Hey, check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got 4,235 videos. Look at all the new shorts we've got with computer-generated titles like Exposed, How I Lost 50,000 Sats to Hackers. Hey, Ben, that's you. Check it out at worldcryptonetwork.com. Moving on to issue 3, Strategy ups Strife offering to $723 million to buy more Bitcoin. Strategy also announces a 10% preferred stock offering to buy more Bitcoin, raising debt in a different way than before. Previously, people would receive shares of MicroStrategy if they bought the stock. Now they will receive dividends. Josh Shigala, what do you think about MicroStrategy, strategy, and I guess Strife, which seems like a negative thing to me, raising money in a different way and using it to buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's this sort of Wall Street mentality where you kind of just build these strange vehicles to that are almost just confusing, but there's a certain class of people that go, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Um, whereas they could just go and buy some Bitcoin. Like, I mean, we're living in a different world now where you can easily buy an ETF if you're that way inclined. You can do there's all sorts of vehicles and ways to buy Bitcoin now, or to buy exposure to the Bitcoin price. And the best way possible for most people would be still to buy the underlying asset and hold it. But that's not the best way for a lot of people, especially some other companies or funds, because of certain regulatory or fiduciary duty. So and it does open them up, like holding the underlying asset does hold them up to security risks. So by doing so, maybe it works for these certain subset of people. But yeah, it's typical sort of Wall Street tomfoolery where they, I don't know, just obfuscate through weird financial vehicles. So yeah, I'm not a fan myself, but whatever. Do as you want. I mean, for me, it's all rehypothecation. It's the path towards rehypothecation. It's what the Rothschilds did to silver by making a certificate instead of the actual asset. It's handy because you don't need to carry massive, heavy bags of silver to the market to buy, your groceries, because now you can just buy the receipt, bring the receipts and trade those. But you're not having the underlying silver that's holding the silver can start to lend out bits of paper on silver that they don't have. So this is the sort of the slippery slope that you don't want to go down. But let's see. Strategy, eh? They removed the micro. That's kind of cool. Should be maybe macro strategy.
I agree, Josh. This just drives me crazy because any of us on this panel, any of us watching this show could have had the idea, hey, let's buy Bitcoin. Let's go to the bank. Let's get a loan. Let's buy more Bitcoin. Hey, let's go to the shareholders. Let's get some more money. Let's buy some more Bitcoin. Hey, let's dividends or whatever this new thing. Let's buy more Bitcoin. It's just the simplicity of the thing, but at the same time, as he keeps stacking these instruments on top of each other, I know he's rich and he understands how this game works, but as a little normal person who looks up at this tower of money, I worry that it might someday fall over. And if it does fall over, it'll likely fall over right on Michael Saylor. I'm sure he'll be fine. He'll use one of his sports cars to get out of the way. But for a normal person, it seems incredibly risky to build all of this complex debt on top of each other, especially like we're talking about here, the possibility, which is real, when the US government and these decision makers realize that they've brought the Trojan horse inside the US financial walls and they say, my God, who brought this Trojan horse in here? Get it out of here. The price of Bitcoin goes down in the public sphere, which could wreck someone who's built a towering edifice of debt structures on top of Bitcoin. So maybe he gets away with it. Maybe it's all fine, or maybe it all ends badly. But if it does, it'll be so large. The bad ending, the tower falling will be so huge. It'll just be, it's so amazing. Like, is it a normal person? Like,
I agree with you on most of it, but I don't think the tower is going to fall on Michael Saylor. The tower is going to fall on you at home. Everybody, the little guy, it falls out on the little guy. So there's a problem with whales, right? If you have these mega whales who are only whales because they've built debt on debt on debt on debt, so that Saylor was very, very lucky that Bitcoin didn't dip below a certain point in the bear market, because there was a chance of a margin call on some of his structures, and these are like reinforcements, right? So if these reinforcements disappear, all of a sudden the whole thing collapses. And so this is a problem. This is the problem with Wall Street in general. They try to use vehicles like debt and promises to build higher towers, and those towers, when they fall, they're painful for the rest of us, because hey, where does it fall? Well, it falls into the market in terms of massive market sells, and then people jump on those with shorts, uh, uh, and those shorts drive further the price down. So you get this rolling cycle. But if you know that's happening, and if you're astute, you can collect dry powder during these bull markets, and be ready for those moments, and actually collect rare assets at great prices. Bring your wife, bring your trailer, and save.
Well, and what's so dangerous about this, Josh, is when they put these big bets on, they also put a liquidation number on the board. And whether it gets reached or not, as we saw recently with Tesla, just putting that number out there could sometimes make people want to conspire the market against you, causing the price to crash to your number. You get drained out. The company goes back up. Your idea was fine, but that number came up. And if this guy keeps putting those numbers up on Bitcoin, we might see a correction that empties him out, maybe even one caused by people who want to empty him out to get the reward of crashing his company, taking his results, and so forth. Let's get Ben Ark here. What do you think about Michael Saylor, who keeps borrowing money in more and more creative ways, as his nickname used to be, Pirate at 40? Google that one.
Yeah. I mean, I want to diverge off a little bit, because there's a really interesting conversation happening in the chat with Starship Schrodinger's Destiny, where he had this idea of mortgaging his flat to buy some Bitcoin, but everyone talked him against the idea. To me, one of the most profound stories I ever saw on the Bitcoin Reddit back in the day was, there was someone, he was dying of cancer, and he sold his house and bought Bitcoin. And I think he had like 18 months left or something. He's like, okay, I'm going to sell my house, going to buy Bitcoin, because I actually think I want to set my family up in the future, and I don't think that the capital I have in my house is going to be able to do that. And this is when Bitcoin was trading at probably about $600 or something at the time. And I was always really interested on the follow-up story as to what happened to his family, because I was like, that was at that particular point in time, was a really good play, what he did. Obviously, Bitcoin's very volatile. And if you go and do things like accumulate debt to buy Bitcoin, then it can really come around to bite you in the bum. But for that particular person, for me, it was one of the posts on Reddit which always stood out for me, just because he was just, he was dying. And it was just such an interesting story. So Starship Schrodinger's Destiny, I'm not saying go mortgage your flat to buy Bitcoin. But and everyone will, of course, always advise you against such an idea. But the I don't know. I mean, it reminded me of that story. So, yeah.
Well, famously, there was the Bitcoin family in the Netherlands who did exactly what you're saying. They sold a house. I believe they moved to a campground, as horrible as that may sound, especially if you're raising children, trying to have them attend school and so forth out of a campground. Not a great situation. But I think they did very well. I think they bought low and the price went up. There might have been another thing, though, where they didn't want to sell their Bitcoin, so they started getting into these same financial vehicles of taking loans and so on and so forth. So I don't know if that worked out for them.
You have to be very careful
of selling everything, living in squalor, depending on your timing, could have been very good in Bitcoin. For all we know, still could be very good. We have no idea.
Yeah, do you remember our good friend, the Rational Investor? No, what was his name? Oh, crikey. He sold everything. He sold even his push bike to buy Bitcoin back in the day, and it was a very, very good call for him at that particular point in time. But I mean, yeah, absolutely. There were some other people in the chat, and they were saying, someone like Saylor's, he's playing with other people's money as opposed to his own money. Ultimately, like he's always going to be a gazillionaire and always going to have a fancy car and a fancy house and a gold shower and whatever else. So it's a different ball game for him. But this idea that I think what Saylor's kind of opened up to the world, this idea of just accumulating debt and buying Bitcoin and then just holding the underlying asset and then using it as collateral to then accumulate more debt through all these different financial instruments, and appealing to all these different investors as well. So with Strife, the investors in Strife, they're getting a dividend. So if you have MicroStrategy stock, then in order to be able to make any money on it, then you're going to have to buy and sell options for your stock. Whereas with Strife, they get an actual dividend. So maybe there's some appeal there for a certain class of investor. It is, however, pegged to the Nasdaq, so you're exposing MicroStrategy to general kind of tech cycle market cycles. But I think it's what I don't like about Saylor's strategy and what he's brought to the table is he's certainly got a lot of sway within the Bitcoin community, and there has been an ideology shift from. I mean, for me, the interesting thing about Bitcoin is the being able to provide digital payment services to unbanked people, for remittances around the world for people who need it and they don't want to pay these astronomical fees which you get from Western Union. All that good at Andreas Antonopoulos stuff. That's the stuff I love. That's the stuff. That's why I work on the software I work on. That's what I'm interested in. So for me, for there to be a culture shift to, I know we always preach the mantra of HODL, but there has really been that culture shift of just never sell that underlying asset, just accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, and that's all you care about. That has filtered down into like VC culture in Bitcoin and other parts of Bitcoin as well, which is kind of a shame because it obviously has this huge quality of being this great medium of exchange and being able to do micropayments and all these other amazing technologies. I don't like that about Saylor. However, like you say, Thomas, it's just so simple and elegant. Bitcoin exists in the world of fiat. There's cheap credit you can get and you can buy more Bitcoin. And I really think it's a matter of time until a country starts doing this. And I honestly think that the US is queuing themselves up to, we're at the point now where that dialectic between fiat and Bitcoin, as Bitcoin eventually emerges as the ideal money, I think it's snowballing. And the cat's out of the bag. Like, people are aware that these two forms of money can't coexist in the world. Like, as long as Bitcoin exists, fiat's dead. Like, it's dying. And that process is being accentuated and is moving faster because people are exploiting the traditional financial system in order to just accumulate this rare asset, which is going up in value quite a lot. And it snowballs. So yeah, you can't help but in some ways respect the dude for figuring out the glitch in the system.
There's definitely as well a kind of a horrible anti-technology type thing happening here where we talk a lot about Trace Mayer and the various network effects and the powers of Bitcoin. And one of those network effects is that Bitcoin is a network, that it's not just digital gold that you just put in your vault. It's digital gold that you can send across the network. You can send to anyone. You could send in small pieces. If you cut off that power and you say, well, you can send it, but no one does it anymore. And maybe it's not because it's not useful, not because it's not cheap or not affordable or not quick, all of those things, just because of a tradition or a belief, kind of a rumor or this thing that someone started. They're like, Bitcoin is good, but don't send it around, just hold it forever. It defeats the network effect in a way that nothing else could. Everything else comes to it and says, wow, what a neat network you can use. But if you just convince people because of like a superstition, like, don't use the network, they defeat it.
I think Josh gets it. Like, this is standard sats. The missing piece really is stability. Like, why would you use it for medium of exchange if it's going up in value in the way in which it is? Like, and what Josh is working on, and the whole whole idea of stable medium of exchange built on things like Bitcoin is very important, because you can have Bitcoin, the asset which accumulates in value, and then you can have all these other mechanisms to have stable medium of exchange, which works with the digital stack which we've built. When it comes to what we do and the thing which I'm interested in, which is banking unbanked people, it really is the missing piece. It's the reason El Salvador didn't adopt Bitcoin. It's the thing which will bootstrap an economy like Suriname, where they have a Bitcoin presidential candidate who's very keen on using Bitcoin for medium of exchange. Like you need stability. So yeah, hats off to everyone who's working on the stable coins. Well done, Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the middle ground between hodl and spendle. Like you know it because eventually I realized, yeah, everyone's right. You should hodl, but the problem is with hodl is it never gets used. The reason why Bitcoin has such value is because idiots like us in the early days spent it like crazy. And that's what gave people the aha moment, like, oh wow, what? I just got this number that you sent me on my phone instantly without a bank in between or a government. Wow, this is amazing. True private money. Um, but the problem is then everyone was like, no, hodl, 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 hodl. It's like, but the stuff isn't moving. Okay, well, if we look at it like gold, if it's digital gold, then keep the gold and use the value of that gold as receipts. But how can we do that better? And that's why we built the standard. It is like Schrodinger's right. It is wrapped Bitcoin. Unfortunately, I'd like to build it on Bitcoin, but I do also understand the logic of not changing Bitcoin too much, so that so because we start to introduce other problems. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the future of Bitcoin, is using it as that underlying asset. And I just don't like when centralized authorities do it. You know, like Strike or whatever Jack Mellor has, or Michael Saylor, when they offer debt on your Bitcoin, or you know, Celsius, BlockFi. These companies went bust and they had everybody's Bitcoin. Terrible, terrible. When this is the whole point. You build maths. Maths is the ultimate regulator.
It seems as well like with gold, used to be a currency. They used to smash it up into little pieces and they'd trade it and they'd send it all over the world. Why not do the same with Bitcoin? If the path to becoming gold was be a currency in little coins sent around the world, then become a reserve where people hoard the little coins in giant vaults and melt them down into big bars, why not the same for Bitcoin? Just, you know, fake it till you make it, follow the same path. And I'm going to horrify all the libertarians here once again. There will be a law against companies holding Bitcoin on their balances. This idea that you don't need to make widgets anymore, you don't need to be a company anymore, you don't need to have employees anymore. This idea could eat all of business. If the Bitcoin hypothesis that it just goes up in value continues to be true, there's no reason to do anything. Anything that you do is less valuable than you holding Bitcoin. And I think if we want to have any companies that make any widgets, we're going to have to make a law to separate those two, to say, if you're a financial services company, sure, hold Bitcoin, hold stocks, hold altcoins, whatever you think is going to go up. But if you make widgets, we need you to keep making widgets, especially Apple Computer and other things like this. I mean, if everyone just stops, which again, if you want to read Infinite Jest, you could. It's out there. Go ahead, Ben.
I think you've got to make money, haven't you? So I actually think that the tool set and the technologies we work on in the crosshairs, the thing which is at stake is big evil monopolistic corporations, which actually in a free market you don't really want that. You want lots of little companies all competing with each other, and that's how a free market works effectively. And when you have big corporations monopolize a market, that it doesn't work, because it monopolizes resources. And I feel that everything we're working on, they're the ones who are really going to ultimately suffer. They're the ones who are just going to give up producing stuff, which will then pave a way for smaller companies to set up and start producing stuff locally or whatever. And then, you know, looking at things like Nostr, like it's a way for, it's a kind of a protocol which smaller capital can exist in, but it can't co-opt the overall commons of the space, the overall resource of the space, much like we have in Bitcoin. So I'm actually very positive. I've got this like very utopian expectation for where the world's heading, where not only do as lefties, we're really happy because it gets rid of all the evil corporations, then people like Josh are happy because you actually have the free markets full of all these companies who are competing within this sort of commons arena where they can't fully try and co-opt the commons. So I'm pretty positive about the future. I think everyone's going to be happy.
I don't know, Ben. It looks like a real Harrison Bergeron, Ayn Rand kind of horror show where the companies that are not good at making things, they're the ones who get the idea to become Bitcoin companies first. So the ones that's not good at making computers. And then they make lots and lots of money and they can buy up the companies that actually make computers and stop them from making them. And it seems like that poem
But then
by
why would they? They could just buy Bitcoin, to your point.
well, sure.
I think you
I mean, they'll buy them
underestimate.
because they'll want to, because to crush them, to own them. Then they'll just
Humans
break
want
them
more
down,
than
fire
money.
all the people that work at Apple, and get them to make more Bitcoin. I mean,
Humans want to build things. That's the thing. Like some humans actually want to build stuff. They don't want a number going up on their phone. They want to build things and run a team. They want to be leaders. They want to be.
I don't know,
It's
Josh.
all
I
sorts
read
of
that
different.
that 0 to 1 book by Peter Thiel, the big startup guy, and I was all ready to be like, startups are cool. Let's make new industries. And at the core of his belief, and he's a major startup guy, so a lot of the startup people believe like him, is that a startup is out there to make a monopoly. Amazon's out there to cut everyone out of business so they can make a monopoly, so they can raise the prices, and no one can stop
Monopolies are
raising
impossible. You
prices.
cannot, in a true free market, you cannot have a monopoly. It just
Or
doesn't happen.
or an oligopoly, whatever allows me to raise the prices without any penalties and have no competitors. That's
But then,
all.
The only way
but,
you can
but
have a monopoly is if you get the state to do it for you.
and to
force
Josh's point as well, Thomas, like most of the innovation which a lot of these companies monetize, it's done by fucking university professors and academics and people who aren't on mega corporate salaries. So when it comes to people just wanting to build stuff and make things more efficient, and it's true, like people just they like inventing things and being more efficient and creating new ways of doing things. So just because you get rid of the big corporations doesn't mean you're not going to have innovation. In fact, you probably have more innovation because you've got more private capital competing with each other. I don't believe I'm doing this, but I'm arguing for a free market.
University guy's salary. The university
Good on you,
guy's
Dan.
salary has just been cut. There's no more research being done.
America's screwed, but whatever.
There's no more research here. Sorry. All right. Well, we'll just have to wait, see if there's more research. Let's go on to the exit question. Michael Saylor says things that other Bitcoiners have said and gets headlines. Saylor says Bitcoin will hit 13 million in 20 years. There it is again. Josh Agala, Saylor says things other Bitcoiners have said, gets headlines.
Yeah. Well, I was still waiting to see Ben's headline of what was it, 600 billion?
600 billion. 600 billion.
That's 600 billion. That's the headline that should be
Ben
there.
predicts 600 billion.
Michael Saylor predicts 600 billion and one headline.
It is amazing that there's always this new headline that X predicts 1 million, X predicts 2 million, X predicts 13 million, 15 million, and it's like 600 billion or fuck off. Got a sticker.
Yeah, 600 billion.
Right,
yeah, 13 million. Tiny. What's he? What a small fry thinker.
Both Mad Bitcoins and Max Kaiser have both predicted infinity dollars. It will flip the dollar, the highest prediction possible.
Can I tell the story of 600 billion and where it came from for some of our listeners?
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so my friend DNI, who's a very, very gifted, very clever developer, he went to one of the Bitcoin conferences, and there's this kind of older guy there at the conference, a grey beard in the true sense of the word, and he knew a lot about Bitcoin. And my friend DNI, he knows a lot about Bitcoin. He's a legit Bitcoin developer, has been for many years. And he was chatting to this older gentleman, and over the course of the conversation, my friend DNI was thinking, man, this guy knows so much about the early days of Bitcoin. This guy could legitimately be Satoshi. And then it got to the part of the night where they'd had a few beers, and then my friend DNI was like, well, how much do you think Bitcoin will eventually be worth? You know, a Bitcoin per dollar. And then this older guy who legit got older guy proved himself in all his in knowledge. He turned to my friend DNI and he looked him square in the face and he just said 600 billion a Bitcoin. And without a flinch, without a smirk, with nothing, 600 billion a Bitcoin. And it broke my friend DNI because he's good developers. We can all be a little bit on the autistic spectrum. And he just spent the next month just saying to all of his friends, 600 billion. what the fuck, 600 billion, 600 billion, to the point where it ended up becoming this meme. So that's where the 600 billion meme comes from. It's from that wizened Satoshi, wherever he may be.
Brilliant. Yeah, 600 billion. That's the North Star.
Well, and what that does is that helps you quantify what we're saying about replacing the dollar. That it really will be that kind of insane price. And certainly at 600 billion, no one will own one whole Bitcoin.
It's a land grab. It's when that's when
yeah.
the US is printing huge amounts of dollars to buy Bitcoin, to the point where everyone just gives up on using the dollar, and then that's when it dies, is when it's at 600 billion of Bitcoin.
Which is what they really want to do, and what they've announced they want to do, and what they've tried to do, but they can't do it with just executive orders. They actually have to pass a law to invest that much money into Bitcoin. That's why they're just using the seized Bitcoin so far, the drug dealers' Bitcoins. Well, Ben, thanks for stalling long enough. I was able to take a screenshot of this ad-protected New York Times head story that you cannot enjoy because you do not pay for the New York Times. On any other day, this would be our number one story. If the president wasn't in Bitcoin, this would have been the number one story. We would have broken down the whole show. We could have went live for this. Here we go. Issue 3, New York Times. Sound engineer for Eminem stole and sold his songs for Bitcoin. About 25 unreleased songs by the rapper were discovered online. Investigators traced sales of the music to a former employee. According to federal prosecutors, the employee stole the songs for Bitcoin. Josh Shigala, Eminem, one of the greatest rappers in the world, multiple platinum Grammy award-winning best-selling artist. His songs stolen, early versions published online illegally for Bitcoin. What do you think about this story and how much value it places on Bitcoin that the New York Times even covers it?
The New York Times. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That if you have a product that's a digital product, it can be stolen and sold online. I mean, any sort of digital IP, including mostly it's your data out there, folks. So this is the same sort of thing. Your data gets sold all the time, and so this is just another case of a digital asset being sold for another digital asset. And the thing is, the reason why it's sold for Bitcoin is because you have a far wider market. You can sell it to anybody in the world. And yeah, I mean, maybe it should have been Monero, because then he wouldn't be busted. Because, Bitcoin, not too anonymous.
Yes, it could have been Microsoft. It could have been secret government plans or secret corporate plans. It could have been anything, but it was Eminem's raps that they sold for Bitcoin, a thing of value. Ben Ark, what do you think about the raps being stolen and sold for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a bit of a dick move. Like, clearly, Eminem. So in the article, it said that he had these songs on a storage device, on a hard. I was going to say hardware wallet, on a hard drive, and they were kept offline in a safe. And it's just these songs which he's working on, and he needs to finish, and then he will release them to the world. And then the sound engineer who left the company then stole the songs and sold them for what seems to me to be quite a low amount, considering. So in the article, it says that he faces 10 years of imprisonment and a $250,000 fine. And I'm all for data wanting to be free. But to me, it's just, a bit of common theft from somebody not
Totally,
respecting the
it's
artist.
theft. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how much did he get? Because I didn't see.
50,000. He got $50,000 in Bitcoin in 2024, and it's probably worth that now. Oh no, yeah, well no, it'll be worth more. But the yeah, and he faces a $250 fine, and so like you say, he probably should have sold it from an hour on the dark market. But I think that the reality is there were so few people who had access to those hard drives that all fingers pointed at him anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a breadcrumb trail.
That's true. And that's what it all comes down to, is good old fashioned police work. I've said this also on the show, like, stop tracking and tracing money. Stop using money as the way to catch everything. Yeah, it's the easier way, but you need to architect money in a terrible way for that to be a possibility. The better way to do it is have free money, which is private, and because that becomes the best sort of money, best sort of medium of exchange. But you want to have good old-fashioned police work to bust these people. And good old-fashioned police work is like, who had access to that vault with the hard drive? Oh, it's this 3 people. Okay, where were you? And do, whatever it takes to take a thief down.
It definitely shows what a terrible idea it was to steal these songs. They were very unique. Only he and likely other recording engineers and Eminem had access to them. So it was a very bad choice, bad decision. And as Ben was saying, the worst part about it is that now Eminem is after this guy. Eminem's after him.
Oh, he's going to write a song about him. That's for sure.
And how much he hates Bitcoin too.
Rap. Yeah. Stole my songs for Bitcoin. And Ben's also right. It is terrible when this happens to unfinished work. There was a movie, I'm sorry, I forget the name, but not too long ago, where it was leaked and some of the effects shot were not finished. And people watched the movie anyway, and it basically ruins the movie. In the same way with these songs, sometimes incredible things are done in editing, remixes, different background tracks. They can change the entire way that you interpret the song. But if you heard the rough version first and it's no good, it could ruin the whole song. So it is a major tragedy for an artist when information is stolen like this. But like Josh is saying, it could have been any data. Could have been Microsoft data, whatever it is. The key to us and to this show and why we covered it is because it was stolen for Bitcoin. We got a couple more stories we'll cover quickly. We're running out of time. Bitcoin and Dogecoin are in the clear after the SEC says that crypto mining doesn't violate securities law. The SEC says Thursday that proof of work crypto mining with Bitcoin and Dogecoin doesn't fall under its definition of securities. Also, we've heard that Bitcoin, NFTs, Layer 2, and restaking, their hype is completely gone. No one cares anymore, which is exactly what everyone says right before everyone starts to care again. Josh Shigala, what do you think about the SEC, which of course can be changed by the next president, saying that it doesn't violate the law, and the interesting story about NFTs and others losing their hype, perhaps never to be gained again, which is what they always say right before it comes back. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, something isn't collectible purely because it's collectible. And we're seeing this in NFTs. We're seeing it. You can have 1 billion NFTs, and this is why I meant in true free markets you cannot have a monopoly. You cannot have a monopoly. It's just not possible. I know I've got pushback in the chat there, but it was redacted. But yeah, in a true free market you can't. And the thing is that if you try to walk into your, this is a little bit off subject, but if you try to walk into the meeting of your board and say, right, we're going to buy up all of our competition and we're going to create a monopoly without the government, because monopolies are only possible with the state, even though they're there to stop monopolies. If you get a company, and buy up everything, you know what happens is that eventually you get to the very last company that and their price is so ridiculously high that they're not. And meanwhile, all these little startups are like, have you seen that crazy Josh guy? He's like buying all the competition. Let's start some competition because he's going to buy us. Like, that's just what happened. So and why I'm saying this as well is look at the NFTs, look at all the shit coins out there. They're all competition because in crypto it's a true free market. You billions and billions of competitions out there for the best meme or the best this or the best that. It's madness out there, and the SEC can't. It's ridiculous. It was a fool's errand to try to stop it. I would say, the regulation might need to happen on centralized exchanges. If you're operating in a certain country, then you should follow their rules. But yeah, the hype is gone. The hype is gone, but it'll be back. Someone will find a collectible that is actually collectible and not just fast food. And this is the problem. It's been diluted with fast food, the whole place. But yeah, a bit of a mixed comeback there.
Well, we might not need a total monopoly. I think an oligopoly is fine with me as long as it's Coke and Pepsi and it's just Coke or Pepsi. And as we've seen in the past, you come up with a new product like vitamin water, or there's a new one in the market right now called Poopy or Popsy or something. It's puts positive things, healthy things into the drink. It was bought by Pepsi last week. It's as
Yeah.
fine. It's as fine as you can have as many competitors as you want, as long as Facebook can buy Instagram and Facebook can buy WhatsApp, and whatever the new company is gets bought up by the structure. Like it's fine, and the government does seem to allow it. Josh, they don't break them up. Google was supposed to be broken up. Microsoft was supposed to be broken up. We saw that fail. Now Facebook is just openly buying competitors and crushing
But they're
them.
not. It's not a monopoly. A monopoly is where there
And the
are
key is that
no
is there
other
any
social
competition?
networks.
Yeah, but is there any legitimate competition to Facebook like Coke and Pepsi? Who's the number two?
Yes. They said no one I know uses Facebook at all.
What do they use
No.
to share their photos with their family?
I don't know.
Noster, they all use
idiot
Noster.
grandmas that use. Yeah, a lot of people use Noster. There's plenty of competition out there. Plenty.
You can't name one.
This would be my what I would say to the idea of monopolies. So I think a monopoly obviously skews a free market, and Josh is saying that you can't have a monopoly, but I mean the game of Monopoly was created to show that in a free market that you do end up with monopoly. But the so if I control the resources, then it's very hard for other people to compete with me because I managed to privatize all the natural resources, which I probably stole from indigenous people, whoever else. But the point is, like, how do you prevent monopoly? And the previous tools we had were state control. You would have a state, and the state, and this is what Adam Smith said, that the state would have to come in and prevent a monopoly from happening. So there was free competition in the market, but as we've all seen, that's very corrupt, and it's not probably the best way to deal with it, and actually probably creates monopolies for their own interest because it is an oligarch class after all. So ultimately, we battle them with the free and open source technology stack, where we turn all these things which should be commons into commons, such as Amazon, for example. So there was a couple of people chatting about the Amazon example. Me personally, I don't think that that's the most efficient form of production. That Jeff Bezos leeching all that value out of Amazon isn't efficient. And there's a more efficient form of production where the producers themselves get more of the value of the products they're buying and selling. But in order to do that, you need a very like complicated and technology stack to be able to compete with it, more of a kind of commons cooperative. So I honestly envision a world where huge corporations like Amazon become cooperative commons of self-interested private capital competing with each other, and then within everywhere else, there's just a free market of private capital competing. But when it comes to the big corps, the Facebooks and the Twitters, they'll be replaced by Nostr. They'll be replaced by protocols which can, you can do the same things you can do on Twitter with Nostr, and it's more efficient because you've got that permissionless development environment where actual human innovation can take place in a way which is very organic and isn't top down and encourages it. And there's also competing capital as well within, like, Twitter doesn't have competing capital within Twitter, whereas Nostr does. It has all these different projects which are all competing with each other. So as I said before, I'm very optimistic about a brave new world where those big corps, so like on the left, when people talk about private capital, they talk about the big evil corporations. On the right, when people talk about capital, they talk about the really lovely, very healthy transactions which happen in a free market between consenting buyers, consumers, and producers. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice by just lumping all private capital within the same basket and saying, well, this is private capital. It's not. Like, it's different. It's, there's slavery was a form of private capital and it sucked. Like, child labor is a form of private capital and it sucks. Like, it's a spectrum of suckiness to greatness. And I honestly think that the tools in which we're building within the Bitcoin ecosystem, within Nostr, it has the potential. It's not just within our own ecosystem, within other ecosystems as well. It has the potential to create a fairer, better world where we replace evil, like surveillance capitalism and all these coercive forms of capital which exist in the market. And then we level the playing field so private capital can compete in a proper free market. And that's how you have a free market. And that's also when state withers and dies, which we all want to happen.
Ben,
Then you
sounds
got to be careful putting your arm like that at that certain angle, because the left will take a photo of that and say that now you're a Nazi. Like they did with Elon.
yeah, but
I was doing the Elon wave.
Yeah. Don't throw your heart out at the crowd.
Yeah, I don't know, Ben, if that's going to work. It seems like Ben's been reading Cory Doctorow's new book about how to save the internet, how to rewire.
I've invented that. This is my whole economic theory. I call it the Adam Smith invisible bitch slap. So you had the invisible hand. So a lot of people misinterpret the invisible hand. So Adam Smith's invisible hand, when he spoke about the invisible hand, it wasn't just this magical, ethereal thing where you all had these self-interested individuals, which would then create an equilibrium within markets. It wasn't that at all. It was that the merchants at that time in the UK had a vested interest in increasing the living standards of everyone in the UK, even if they were psychopaths, just for their own security, because it would mean that they would be more secure because everyone else is happier and they're less likely to try and steal, their attack their mansions and try and steal their artworks or whatever else. So there was this vested interest by the merchants who lived in the UK at that time and the industrialists. But then what you had was you had a shift from that form of private capital. It's a very interesting time in history, so in the late sort of 1700s, where you had a shift from that form of private capital to the multinational corporation, like with the East India Company, for example, where suddenly it's this faceless corporation which has no moral tie to the people in which it's employing or exploiting or whatever else. And then that form of capital was very different to the form of capital which Adam Smith was arguing about with the Adam Smith invisible hand. So what I'm saying is in Bitcoin, for example, and in Nostr, if me running a Bitcoin company tries to co-opt the Bitcoin protocol and co-opt that commons, I will get bitch slapped by the community. So it's very important that free and open source community exists, building that commons. I will get that bitch slap. And that's the Adam Smith invisible hand bitch slap, to keep everyone in check. And that's what I want to see. I want to see these things turn into commons where everyone can operate. And then if anyone tries to co-opt it, they get the bitch slap, just as someone like a Roger Ver had back in the day. But yeah, it's my new economic theory. It's called the Adam Smith invisible bitch hand slap. And I'll write one of them Bitcoin books and sell it everywhere at all the Bitcoin conferences.
Unfortunately, what we've seen, Ben, is that the Facebooks and other people use the work of the open source programmers. They use the work of these open collectives. They steal it and they make their walled gardens better. The specific example recently, Facebook needed to scan a bunch of books. They were trying to work with the publishers. The publishers were sending the books very slowly. The Facebook engineers said, hey, look at this community created group of pirates who have created LibGen, an incredible library of books. Let's just use that. And they say, according to the articles, allegedly and so forth, that the chain of decision goes all the way up to MZ, and that MZ, Mark Zuckerberg himself, approved for the Facebook engineers to steal the work of the pirates and to steal the work of the authors who wrote the books and to scan them to make their own AI so that they could make billions and billions of dollars. So once again, these companies will use the open source programmers, they will use the pirates, they will use the commons, and they will line their own pockets. And again, Instagram was the competitor. Instagram was the competitor to Facebook, where you could put up your photos that had a network effect that was growing, that could have expanded their services, but never did and won't now because they've been owned. WhatsApp was the competitor for Facebook. It had a network effect. People were using it to communicate. They could have added services and competed with Facebook. They never will now because they're owned by Facebook. They are eating the competitors. It is whether Josh.
Then similar to Bitcoin and fiat, the very fact that something like Nostr exists means that over time there'll be the dialectic between those two forms of private capital, and over time the free and open source permissionless development environment, the commons, has properties which it just simply can't compete with, just on the amount of development and the amount of innovation which happens in that space. It can't compete with it. And this is why free and open source always wins. No matter what, it wins. And it's
That's definitely what we
Stallman
hope
himself
for,
said the
but
same thing.
we
Someone
worry
said,
about how long the line is. If it's like nuclear half death and like the half life, and
but
these things
this is
breaking down, and
someone
there's
once
no
said
one
to
left. Like,
Richard Stallman. Someone said to Richard Stallman, you know, is free and open source communist? And he said, no, it's not communist. He said, it's communist, and at the same time, it's also like it's you know, libertarian free capital, because anyone can take the software, build a business on top of it. Anyone can, but then you have the free and open source commons, which everyone, the community contributes back to, which everyone can make use of. So it's free and open source really is like the best of both worlds. Like we transcend all these like trivial little arguments, and we end up with what everyone wants, which is less government, you know, less with a state, and then these controls in place which aren't operated by centralized points of failure. They're operated by the community as a whole in order to keep that commons and that free market free for everybody.
I remember when Bill Gates called free and open source communist, and everyone was so mad. And I got this great shirt, little printed up by this guy that had a copy left thing, and I said, "No, we're not communists. We're communists. Communists."
Josh is fanning the flames right here in the chat.
Oh well, it's all about the
It's trolling.
commons. But here in the commons, we're running out of time. Ben, your camera turned off, FYI. But we're going to the end of the show. Ben, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Not really. I mean, so we're still working on Ellen Bits V1. We were going to do an RC10, but we can't keep doing these release candidates. It's ridiculous because we said that it would be released by now, but it takes time to get these things right. And I feel bad because everyone's been working solidly on it this week. But me personally, I've been having to do other stuff within Ellen Bits on the company side, which meant that I couldn't actually do much development. So yeah, I apologize to everyone who's been like contributing and testing the software, and I'll pull my finger out and pile in next week.
All right, let's go to Josh Shigala for a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead, Josh.
I predict that we'll hopefully head towards resolving the crisis in Ukraine, and I hope that we can have peace, because the last thing we want is people playing with large scale weaponry that escalates into madness.
Well, I do hope we have peace in Ukraine. I remember that, of course, historically, Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons to the United States and the world after the Soviet Union broke down, with many peace and security guarantees that have not been met. But we'll see how that goes, Josh. We'll see how that goes. I don't have that much to say today. I started a tradition of doing movie reviews here, so I'm going to keep that tradition up. This week's movie is Blade. It came back up on the Apple TV. It was on sale, like 3 movies for $10 or something, so I pulled it down. And let me just tell you, this is a fantastic movie. In many ways, Blade kicks off the comic book movies that you all know and love, the MCU, but it was just about 10 years before that. It takes itself seriously. It builds a world. It seems real. The bad guys have motivation. The good guy hardly talks. It's a great movie. Check out Blade wherever you check out movies. Josh, any comments on Blade? I know you like movies too.
Yeah, wow, Blade. That was one that just came out of nowhere. Nice. Yeah, one I really want to rewatch. Like Blade, it was sort of a classic, but not really. Is RoboCop? I'd like to see that again, because I think there's a whole lot of stuff in that movie that was predictive, and so I'm interested to enjoy that one again as well.
Definitely recommend RoboCop. Paul Verhoeven is a fantastic filmmaker, and there's tons of stuff in there, Josh. All the stuff on TV. There's a recurring sitcom that kind of makes fun of sitcoms where the catchphrase is, "I'd buy that for $1."
I'd buy that for $1. I think the coolest thing about RoboCop was the way the bad guy, he looked like a geography teacher, and it made him so sinister. He wasn't like your typical bad guy. He was kind of balding, had the glasses. And it's a great film. Great film. I have to watch that now.
Later on, he's the father on that 70s show. And he is pretty foreboding as the father. Like, he's pretty strong on his son. But in the same way, I've seen him in some interviews recently. And I think the same thing you thought, Ben. If I saw that guy in real life, and I'm sorry, I forget his name, but I would be terrified. I'd be like, you gave such a strong performance in RoboCop. I am afraid of you, even though I know that acting is not real. That's how much I respect your performance. So. Another neat thing about the movie Blade, I was thinking about. I think this is a year before, or maybe 2 years before The Matrix. So before The Matrix changed all of special effects forever. If you watch Blade, I just watched part of it this morning. The fighting is all real. Wesley Snipes is a martial artist. He's a big dude. He's throwing people around. The shots are all up close. It's all square. It's not shot from crazy angles. There's no crazy computer graphics backgrounds. It's pretty fun to go back and see how they could do a comic book movie in the real world, basically, in a serious way. And that I think in a lot of ways, the ideas and the success, the monetary success of Blade leads to the MCU and all the movies that you're probably watching now. So go back and check out Blade. But thanks to everybody for joining us. Still a great chance to give us a thumbs up down below or push subscribe if you're just joining us this week. And that's about it. We'll be back next time. So until next time, bye.
Bye.